Yeah, so welcome again, everyone. On today's KBase webinar, we're going to hear from Ben Bolduc at Ohio State University. He is an expert in viral bioinformatics and has developed several tools and also has put those tools in KBase for all of you and the rest of the scientific community to use. So he's going to tell us all about our new viral analysis workflow on the system in just a little bit. Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping stuff. You can see in the chat where our questions and answers document was posted. So throughout the webinar, if you have questions, we encourage you to write them in here. Ben has one of his colleagues on the call today to help answer the specific questions about the tools. And of course, we have KBase staff on the line today to also help answer any questions you might have about the platform. Just a few other things to be aware of. If you didn't register for the webinar, we encourage you to just log your information here so that we can track the impact of these outreach events. If you haven't created a free KBase account, of course, would encourage you to do so. You can follow this link at the top to do that. After the webinar is done, if you have any feedback, we'd encourage you to give that to us using this form here. I'll of course send that to everybody via email afterwards. And like I said, we are recording, so we will distribute this afterwards. And I'll show you where to get access to that in just a second. If you are a Twitter user, please follow us on Twitter at DOEKBase. We have a lot of interaction with users on there, and we're always posting about new updates, new events for our community to attend. And if you're on YouTube, I also encourage you to follow our YouTube channel, where we're posting a lot more videos about how to use different aspects of the system. And if you're on our main website, maybe some of you have noticed that we've got a new website that we just launched just a month or two back. You can always find out about our webinars if you go to the Learn tab at the top and scroll down. You'll see our webinars upcoming and our previous webinars where you can watch the recording. So yeah, please check all of that out. And one other thing, of course, is to announce our documentation site. We also have a new documentation site at docs.kbase.us where our documentation staff are always updating things and putting new information on there. So if you ever have questions about how to do something in KBase, definitely consult docs.kbase.us. All right, with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ben Bolduc from Ohio State University.
Thanks, Ben. Let me just share my screen. And okay, looks like it's working.
Yep, it's working.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so thank you to KBase for allowing me this opportunity. I'm super excited to be doing this. I've always been watching Ben and his colleagues at KBase do these webinars, and so it's been really exciting to finally get to lead one of these. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you. Some of you, this might be your first KBase webinar, so welcome. For those of you who are tuning in for the 11th, 12th time, whatever it might be, thank you for coming to the best one, where we'll be talking about viral tools that are now available in KBase. So I know Ben mentioned we have the Google Doc where people can ask questions. I have a colleague of mine, Dr. Jerome Guo, who will be answering any questions that people have. And if any aren't addressed by Jurong or by the KBase staff, at the end of the webinar, I will circle back to and try to address as many of those questions as I can. So I'm going to be skipping a bunch of the kind of generic KBase, what is a narrative kind of things, mainly because most people who are here have attended a few of these webinars before. But if you haven't, please, please, please go check out KBase's Learn webinar series. They've got a lot of really useful information. I actually watched all of them in preparation for this. And despite developing with KBase for a while now, there's still quite a few things that I was learning in that series. Okay, so let's make sure that works. Okay, I've got a mouse. Okay, so at the top of this narrative, which is a public shared narrative, and it's also static, so you don't even have to sign in. You can view this. It's a little introduction about what we'll be going over. It has a couple objectives. For example, we're going to be first assembling viral metagenomes using viral reads. Then we're going to identify those viral sequences and then finally classify them. At the top here is a figure that I'm working on for a new iVirus 2.0 manuscript. And these are basically the steps that one would take in KBase in order to process a viral metagenome. And of course, if you hear, it's kind of a spoiler alert, you can do that. And surprisingly, amazingly, I guess you could add. So if you're here, you might be interested in viruses, or you could be finally those microbial converts who are realizing how important viruses are and want to find them in your data sets. So, oh yeah, just one thing. There's a table of contents to go through all of the different steps here. If you click on any of these, it will take you to the relevant section. And then in each one of these sections, there will be a back to top button that will jump you back up here so you can quickly navigate throughout. So the first question people are always asking me about is like, why bother studying these viruses? And I put a few reasons why, kind of little factoids that might get you excited. I won't just read a list of these, but I will highlight a few of them that I really think are pretty relevant and interesting. For example, there's 10 to the 31st virus particles on the planet. That basically makes them the most biological abundant entities on the planet, which is something that most people really don't take kind of to heart or appreciate. And I know there's a paper published, I should probably remember it. I don't want to get the author's name wrong. But basically, if you stretched on average all the viruses end to end, it's like 20 or 200 light years. It's kind of incredible. They lyse between 20 to 40% of ocean microbes every single day, which is also kind of mind-boggling, because if you think about it, every 3 days, you're basically having an entirely new ocean of microbes. They can also steal microbial genes, known as AMGs, auxiliary metabolic genes, that actually can encode pathways like photosynthesis. And someone might be curious, like, why would a virus steal metabolic genes when viruses don't do metabolism? Well, viruses can boost the metabolism of the microbes that they're infecting in order to get more, get more viruses produced. They can also infect other viruses. So we've got some really large viruses that are, a megabase or larger, and you can have smaller viruses infect those. Many of the toxins that we think of as bacterial are actually come from viruses, like Bordetella, cholera, Shiga toxin. And viruses probably most relevant to this audience. They're often hidden in data sets. So if you have any weird spurious results in your sequencing data, you're like, I know it's not a microbe, I know it's not a plasmid, it's not hitting any of the plasmid databases. Well, could be a virus, and it could be affecting your results in ways that you really didn't expect. So hopefully you guys are getting excited about this. So this narrative basically processes a data set, an actual real data set, because I always hate when people use mock data and you always get perfect results. And that always just doesn't sit well with me, because people are going to take that data set take that scenario and apply it to their own data set, and it's not going to work out. And then they're going to be wondering why it didn't work. Well, you gave it perfect data. Of course, you're going to get perfect results. So what we're going to be doing is importing read data from the SRA. And this data set is from the Global Ocean Virome data set. A number of years ago, maybe 5 or so, there was a Terra Oceans expedition. And basically what this expedition did was circle around most of the ocean, the global oceans, and sample at various depths. And then they also captured various life forms from really large, like fish size, all the way down to plankton and other microbes. And alongside that, they also captured a viral fraction as well. And so what I've done here is just selected one of these data sets almost at random, so that we could kind of grab one of these data sets and see what we see. The data set that I picked is kind of in the Indian Ocean here. I did not know beforehand how many viruses would be in this sample. I don't have any personal experience with this sample. I do know that several of my colleagues have processed these data sets. So I do know that viruses are here, but I don't know how many. So I'm kind of learning with everyone at the same time, basically. So people should already be familiar with how to upload data into the KBase narrative at this point. You can drag and drop. I've got this little link here where people can go and navigate to here. And I also have a link to the run itself. So if I would click on this, it would open up a new window, which would take us to this page. Click on the data access tab. And then there's a nice convenient little link here for you to copy and paste into the KBase's import SRA reads files as reads from the web. This is kind of some of the stuff I'm going to skip through because you guys can just follow along. I don't want to waste your time just clicking and doing the exact same steps. This did take a little while to run. I don't know if that was just the time of day or if SRAs was kind of slow. It took a few hours to download this, I don't know, 5-6 gigabyte data set. I think maybe it's 10 total. So the first thing that we want to do is, let's see here. Okay, assess the read quality, because even though the data set could be pretty good, like the people who uploaded into SRA have cleaned it up a bit, I still always like to know what's going into any assembler, because assembling sequence data is time consuming and computationally expensive, regardless of what assembler you're using. And for many labs, it's actually costs money to run this. And so to kind of quote, and I have it in here, a computer science phrase, garbage in, garbage out. So you want to always be giving the best data set that you can get when you're assembling in order to get the best data out. So for this, we'll use FAFSQC. I won't, let's see, I won't go into too much detail here either. There's nothing really specific about viral sequence data that you should kind of be aware of using FAFSQC. Let's see here. This is actually a really good data set. We could probably trim up a little bit in the front, back, maybe tighten up this quality. So it's probably worth trimming. You could probably get away not trimming it, but don't. I guess you're recording me, so you didn't hear it from me. So we're going to go ahead, trim this using a really popular tool called Trim-O-Matic. And Trim-O-Matic is one of the couple of tools that are available in KBase for retrimming. I like to use Trim-O-Matic just because I'm most familiar with it, and I've been using it for a number of years. And it always gives me really good results. JGI actually has the BB Tools set that I often use for trimming reads, especially very large scale data sets. And it's also really fast. And if we look at the results from Trim-O-Matic, we had 86% of our reads. We had, what is that, 100? About 32 megabases in here. So it's a standard size data set from the GOV data set. So that's kind of par for the course. After trimming, I always like to recheck to make sure that everything looks good. As I said, I just really want to make sure that what we're throwing into the assembler is pretty good quality. And thankfully, the couple X's that we had here are now gone. The read quality, as you'll see, it's typical for Illumina reads just due to the sequencing technology. The quality is quite good throughout. That looks good. As I said, I won't go into any details. There's actually a webinar and a couple websites actually that go over the FASTQC results. The next thing we're going to do is go over assembly. So how should I explain this? With viral read data, there actually is some assemblers that are better than others. And I don't want to get into a battle with what is kind of the best assembler because there really is no best assembler. There's been a review paper published a couple of years ago and also a couple other papers that have addressed this issue. This PeerJ article, the one that I linked here, is actually really good because it kind of looks at all aspects of the viral things that would be important for assembling viral sequence data. I would say the edge should be given to Metaspades. It does a little bit better with kind of circular data, and it performs just a hair better than Megahit, which is also available in KBase. And both of those perform better than IDBA. So if you're concerned about getting the best possible quality, I'm talking like, 100.0% quality, I would go with Metaspades. But the challenge and the problem with Metaspades is that it has incredible computational requirements. So if you're running on KBase, then that's okay because they've got the resources available to assemble that data. But for some data sets, even KBase might not be enough. In fact, 12 terabyte memory nodes might not be enough to assemble just a single data set with Metaspades. It all really depends on your data type and basically the sequence complexity. So in that case, you could get just a slightly less with Megahit, maybe like 99% of maximum with Megahit. And the data set would require half or a quarter of the memory and, would run 10 times faster. So processing a viral data set, Metaspades, Megahit, you can choose. If you're pressed for time or you don't mind, or you really don't have the computational resources to throw terabytes of memory at this, you could go with Megahit over Metaspades. Really, there's no major preference here. Once Spades finishes, the KBase Spades kind of has like a quast result which looks, fine. There's nothing really viral specific about this. I will note that you're going to see a lot smaller contigs, especially those people in the microbial community. We're not going to be dealing with, 5, 6, 700 KB fragments, 1 or 2 megabase fragments, and then we're suddenly putting that all together. I typically look at contigs, the number of contigs over a kilobase and 10 kilobase to kind of give me, allow me to gauge the number of viruses that would potentially be identifying here. I kind of look at the N50s, L50s. I don't put too much stock in those just because I've seen some low quality sequence assemblies that actually have a lot of really great viruses in them. So if the assembler finishes and you get kind of typical results, it maybe doesn't look that great, I would still continue at least to the next step and figure out if it works for you. Sorry, I should probably go over some of the details here. So with Metaspades or MegaHit, I would change a few of the parameters here. I would change the minimum contig length. I don't know what it is by default, I forgot, but I'd put at least 2 KB. Anything smaller than that is really not well. Most tools to identify viruses don't work well past 2 or 2.5 KB. I would also add a number of k-mer sizes here. At the very least, I would add 21, 33, and 55. I think you need to do that at least at a minimum to get your viral data assembling. I don't know what it's like for the microbial world where you can get away with maybe 1 k-mer and that just works for you. But at least for the viral data that I've been dealing with, you need at least those 3. And if you can, I would choose 77, 99, and 127 as well. That will get in my experience, it will improve the quality of your final assembly at the cost of maybe a little bit longer to assemble and maybe a little bit higher memory requirements. But that's not absolutely essential. For years and years, I used the 21, 33, 55, and then some colleagues were using additionally the 77 and 99, and our data sets were pretty much indistinguishable. So you can choose at least those 3, if not all 6 of them. So after we assemble with Metaspades, the next thing we need to do is clean up the contigs. And that's because most viral identification tools perform really poorly when you're below 5 KB. So the tool that we're going to be using is called VirSorter. It's one of the most popular viral identification tools. I often think of it as kind of the gold standard, which a lot of other tools kind of compare themselves against. It is probably one of several that I would probably try on a data set where I have a lot of really small contigs, maybe a lot of larger ones, and yeah. There are a couple other viral identification tools that I'd like to get in KBase, but VirSorter, like I said, is kind of a gold standard. And so it's one of the easier ones, I guess, to kind of integrate here. So what we're going to be doing is basically filtering to contigs that are 5 KB in length or less. I would recommend any non-circular genomes that are greater than 1.5 KB or any circular genomes that are greater than 1.5 KB, because VirSorter can identify those as well. But since we don't have a way of filtering on circularity in KBase yet, we're going to play it safe here and just try to filter any contigs that are below 5 KB. So for that, we're going to use the filter assembled contigs by length. And for that, we go from 18,000 contigs to basically 5, which is totally fine. That is well within what we'd expect for the GOV data set. There's been a meta-analysis kind of that, the GOV data, and you can get anywhere from hundreds to a few thousand contigs, actually viruses, to tens of thousands. So this is kind of right in the middle there, which is actually kind of great. I was really surprised to see 5,000 contigs filtered at the end of this. I was worried that we'd only see 50 or 100, and then that wouldn't look as impressive. So after filtering, we're going to throw it into VirSorter. As I said, this is actually a pretty popular tool. There were a few others out there, but we just haven't had time yet to integrate those into KBase. What I'd love to see is a whole suite of tools, and then users can come in and just either pick their favorite, or actually, in best case scenario, they would actually run 3 or 4 or 5 of these tools on the same data set to play off the strengths and weaknesses of each one of the viral predictors, and then kind of integrate the best predictions all into the same data set. So I wanted to take a moment to explain kind of what VirSorter is and how it works here, because some of you might have never heard of VirSorter and you're furiously, typing away, what is VirSorter, how does it work, where are the references, etc. So basically, what VirSorter does is it uses a scoring scheme that ranks potentially viral candidates into 3 confidence categories. And these confidence categories are basically 1, 2, and 3 for we're almost absolutely certain, we're really sure. 2, we're pretty sure they're viral. There could be a few false positives in there, but the vast majority of rank 2 or category 2 are high quality. And then 3, which is like, this could be a viral, I don't know. I don't have much confidence, but you should, double back and manually check these sequences because we don't know if they're viral or not. Chances are they're not viral. And so these 3 categories are applied to both prophage identified by VirSorter, as well as non-prophage, like free viruses. And those are categories 1, 2, 3, as I've said, and 4, 5, and 6. 4, 5, and 6 correspond to the prophage that are predicted. And so some might be asking, well, what are these characteristics that VirSorter uses? And those characteristics are basically aspects that look, one second, just going to check the chat, make sure. Okay, just making sure that no one had any questions, really important questions for me at the moment. What these categories are basically what looks like a virus. So for example, does this sequence have viral hallmark genes? So not all viruses have a single marker gene. Curse you 16S genes, people who use that for taxonomy, you're cheating, you shouldn't be able to use that. So viruses don't have this hallmark gene, but they do have genes that are common among certain groups. And if you have a sequence that has some of these genes that aren't found in microbes, you can use them in order to identify these viruses. Also, a couple other things. Do they have a lot of hits? The classic, do you have a lot of hits to viral sequences? Do you have kind of genomic organization or genomic features that are characteristic of a virus? Like a lot of really short genes that stay on the same strand. So frequently prokaryotic viruses, and I should actually mention, I should have highlighted this first, VirSorter is only for prokaryotic viruses. We're talking archaeal and bacterial viruses. It's not for eukaryotic. I apologize, I should have mentioned that at the very beginning of this. VirSorter is not designed to work with eukaryotic viruses. but you know, we're working on tools to kind of improve that as well. So you basically have this scoring metric of kind of characteristics of viral genes or viral signatures. And this little figure right here is showing what kind of categories you would expect to see based on, you know, how viral your sequence looks like. So categories 1 are going to have what's in green. You have lots of viral sequences right here. You have some viral hallmark genes. You've got a major capsid protein. Major capsid proteins, or MCPs, aren't present in bacteria or in microbes. So that's definitely a viral hallmark gene. It looks very viral. Portal proteins, also characteristic of viruses. The strandedness, you basically have 1 or 2 strand switching here. It's not uncommon for viruses to use the same strand for all of its coding regions. And yeah, so category 2, you might not have as clear cut a case. You still have a lot of viral-like genes. You have maybe a few uncharacterized genes. You still have that minimal strand switching going on. And interestingly, a way you can identify viruses, or you know, a characteristic of viruses, I should say, is that they don't have a lot of hits to a lot of databases like PFAM. And I know people might be grumbling about uncharacterized or hypothetical proteins. That, of course, the microbes have those too. But when you look at a virus and you have like 80% of your genes are totally unknown or uncharacterized or not hitting PFAM, then you know, the chances of that being viral are far greater than that being some totally unknown microbial region or plasmid. And you can have situations where you have really short or small regions as well. Let's see here. Short regions as well that can get you category 2. It doesn't matter as long as you have a couple viral hallmark genes and some affiliated or uncharacterized genes. The category 3 are pretty much, we don't know what this is. It likely doesn't have any hallmarks. It may or may not have strand switching. As you can see in this example here, it switches the strand a number of times. The genes are kind of short, kind of longer. And so VirSorter at this point doesn't really know what to make of it. It doesn't look microbial, but it doesn't have the kind of confidence it has to make that viral determination. So we're going to, it's a little background. So we'll be using VirSorter for this, like I said. I'll go through a few of the parameters here. First of all, the input file, this VirSorter app was designed to consume assembly objects, KBase assembly or genome objects. And right now you should only have 2 of them available. I can't click on it because I've already run this. Would be your raw data from Metaspades, as well as the filtered data set that we just used. I would strongly recommend to use the filtered, the 5 KB data set. You can include additional phage sequences in here. You need to really trust these phage sequences. So if you have new viruses that aren't in the reference database, which I'm going to get to in just a second, and you're concerned that the reference databases won't have your novel viral genomes in there, but you still want VirSorter to identify those, you can add them to your reference phage sequences. But be really sure that you don't have any microbial or non-viral data in there, because when VirSorter is doing its calculations, it does this through an iterative approach. And so if you have microbial data in your trusted viral sequences, it will kind of grab, it'd be like a fish hook kind of grabbing additional microbial sequences. For the rest of the parameters, the reference database, you can choose the ViromDB or RefDB. The only reason RefDB is here is for people who really don't trust purely predicted viruses that are based on sequence data. I guess I should say that in another way, are predicted viruses that haven't been cultured, basically. Some people still in this day and age don't trust them. And so for those people, we have the RefSeq-DB, where those viruses have been, cultured. Many of them have been cultured, or at least, you have a predicted host and whatnot. The second most important is enable virome decontamination. So VirSorter uses kind of the background signal of your sample in order to gauge what the baseline is for, how many genes it sees as microbial or viral. And another way of kind of saying that is that it figures out viruses by, in a large part, how it looks versus a typical microbial data set. And so if you have a lot of viral sequences, like the majority of your data set should be viral, then it's going to be harder for your viral sequences to appear different than any other sequence in your data set. And VirSorter was designed kind of to fish out or find viruses in microbial data sets, not necessarily purely viral. And so if you have a lot of viruses in your data set, I would definitely enable the virome decontamination. What this does is it forces kind of a generic microbial background signal in order to help it identify viruses. Now, if you don't click this, you will still find viruses. They'll still be good, they'll still be valid, they'll be great, but you might not get as many, and the confidence of those predictions might be a little bit lower. And I was a dummy and didn't do enable virome decontamination. I should have for this data set because it was a viral enriched data set, but I still got great results and I didn't really want to go through and rerun everything because, time is money and wanted to make sure that got this all good and ready. The other options I would not be too concerned about. Enable diamond will speed up the process. There is a bug that I will mention. You should really only use this for when you're adding additional phage sequences if you have a lot of them. The keep blast databases, HMMs, that's a new feature I was hoping to add. I couldn't get it in here before, before this webinar, but eventually, hopefully, I can kind of add that feature there. But this really doesn't do anything at this point. The final option, use if no predicted viruses. So when VirSorter is predicting its metrics, its scoring scheme, basically, it uses a fast, slightly less sensitive, or less sensitive means of identifying viruses. If you don't have any viruses, which could be possible, maybe you really don't have any viruses, but maybe you only have a handful, VirSorter could miss those. And so if you click this, it will increase the sensitivity a bit at the cost of the process or the run taking longer. You can still use this if you have a lot of viruses and you have a lot of viruses in your data set. But the cost benefit, it's not really worth it unless you're really paranoid for adding this for every single data set. Okay, so try to go more quickly through this. The results for VirSorter, you have an assembly object for every single category. And remember earlier, categories 1, 2, and 3 are free viruses that were identified, with 1 being the best confident, highest confidence, 2 being we're confident, but we might not have a a lot of hallmark genes. And then 3, we're really not sure. I would definitely inspect those. And then there's 4, 5, and 6 as well. Now, you might not get all of these categories. In fact, the example data set that I was going to use prior to this, which was like on, 1 million reads, basically, it didn't even have categories 4, 5, and 6. So it didn't have any prophage, and it only had categories 1, 2, and like 2 genomes in virus category 3. So you might not get all 6, but you might, as in this example, get all of them. You also get a binned contigs object. And that was kind of a unique decision here. And basically what this bin contigs object does is it takes each of those categories and applies it to each of the contigs. So you can actually inspect this bin contigs object, and you can use that with any other tool in KBase's family of apps that consume bin contig objects. So I guess I could click on that. I didn't want to have any, in case something like goes wrong, of course. It will have each of the bins, so each of these FASTA files, the number of contigs in each one of them, some generic information here. I'd ignore the marker completion. That's because there's not a lot of viral tools in KBase, and so I've co-opted some outputs from apps that were designed for microbes. And so the one that I adapted it from has marker completeness as an example. And you also get a cute little HTML output, which, let's see, actually I won't click on that to open up a new window, but from here, you can look at each of the contigs, the fragment they were identified from. And so you basically can use VirSorter to identify regions in your contigs that are viral. And a lot of times the fragment and the contig ID are going to be identical. That's because it predicted that whole sequence, or at least 80% of it, as viral. It is possible. Of course, I probably won't see any in the first couple examples. Of course, because we have a lot more non-prophage sequences in here, but you would see like gene from, gene 5 to gene 55 would kind of be the fragment that they're from. And that can give you kind of an indication of what proportion of your data set kind of looks viral, and the the columns here give you some additional information about each one of these sequences. So basically the statistics that went into predicting it as, why it's in a certain category. If we sort here, let's go back to the beginning. Okay, I'm at 1. You can look at the number of phage hallmark genes. So this particular top category has, it's a 63 KB, well, the top 2 are 63 KB. Those are probably viruses. Fragments that have 6 hallmark genes. Interestingly, this category 2, this is a great example. Category 2 here has, that could have, has lots of hallmark genes, but maybe it has more unknown or uncharacterized genes here. And so VirSorter is not totally sure, like this is still pretty sure, but it just is missing that edge to kind of put into category 1, which I would absolutely totally trust here. So you can go through all of these. I won't bore you with the details of going into why for each one of these, but most certainly you can scroll through here and basically break down why a virus would be considered, or why these sequences are considered viral, and then look through each of these objects to see those sequences. Can I just peek over to the chat box just to make sure? Ah, excellent. So awesome that people are answering questions in the chat. Okay, so open the contigs. Okay, so now we're going to run through some hoops here. So I like to call this the fun parts of KBase and integrating apps and tools into KBase. So before we can basically classify these viruses, these putative suspected viral genomes in KBase, we basically need to get an annotated genome object. And as you just noticed from up above, we have assembly objects and we have bin config object. And we need to do a couple of kind of data manipulations to get it from one KBase object into the kind of the KBase object that we need. For that, we need to use Procer or Procer. I've heard it both ways. But to do that, let's see here. Yes. To do that, we basically need to modify the bin contigs object. Let's see here. Oh, and so I know someone is probably going to be asking this in the chat. Why are there these kind of hoops for the user to go through? It's like, hey, you're KBase, you developed this tool. Why would you do this? And basically the reason is because there's a lot of work in the background to basically go through a lot of these hoops. Or I could have just leveraged two apps that are already in KBase, which take all of 2 minutes to run in order to get to the results that we need. And so this is basically a developer time versus user time. So many hours for the developer or like minutes for the user. And so I will go over what you probably want to do here. So the first thing we need to do is modify these bins and bin contigs. I selected the output from VirSorter, this bin contigs. And you need to, if you have bins that you don't want to include kind of in the output here. And this tool can be a little finicky because sometimes if you like only remove things, you'll get lots of separate outputs. And if you want to merge things, if you include some of them to merge, it's all really weird. But basically just do it like this and it will work all the time. I don't want bins 3 and 6, which you kind of can't see here, because 3 and 6 categories are the low confidence. They probably have a couple phage sequences in there because I didn't use viral decontamination, but we're going to throw those away. Those were sacrificed. And then what we do want to do is merge those bins into a single bin. And I called this bin name category 1, 2, 4, and 5 to represent what bins they represent. And so I added 1, 2, 4, and 5 here. And so this app will give us these bins as a single merged bin. And output bins, I use the same name. I used the same name here, so I wasn't going to get confused. Surprisingly, there's not 2 objects that are generated here. There's just 1, which, yeah. And then the next thing we need to do is extract those bins as an assembly object. Now, the reason it's an assembly object, and I also generated assembly objects from earlier, is in the situation where you might only have categories 1 and 2 as an assembly. And so you can specifically select and just bypass all of these kind of object manipulations in order to go directly into Procer. But in this situation, we had all 6 categories, and so we needed to do some data filtering. So the next thing we're going to use is Procer, and Procer actually has output that directly can feed into the tool that we're going to be using here. And let's see here. So I use this because it's the only tool in KBase that kind of directly has output formats that vContact, the tool that I'll tell you about in 1 second, consumes. You could use other prediction tools. There are viral prediction tools available, but they haven't been released yet. And so I didn't want to use any like beta or alpha stage apps to do this. But Procer works pretty well. The one thing I would use here is under the advanced parameters, choose kingdom for viruses. That will improve the annotations, the viral, you'll get a lot more annotations than you would if you use the other kingdoms, kind of obviously. The results are actually where we can start kind of, seeing what these viruses actually look like, because VirSorter doesn't have these kind of annotations. And so something I really love doing here, and this is actually really exciting because you can't do this in other cyber infrastructures. And so we can actually, browse here. Like, remember I was mentioning major coprotein earlier? And so I will type in major capsid. Oh, yes. Okay, major capsid protein. And you click on this feature. Oh, beautiful. Okay, and I just did this. Like, I could probably have clicked on any of these and some of them would have like not worked. I don't know. They probably all work. Always get embarrassed if like you do something in a webinar and like it's totally not what you would expect. But what did we say earlier about VirSorter's kind of identification metrics? We have a major capsid protein, lots of hypothetical proteins. I was kind of hoping for a couple, maybe a tail fiber or something in here, but that's okay. That's okay. And they're all on the same strand. The genes are tightly compacted next to each other. Like I said, this definitely looks viral. And let's see, let's push out look just a little bit more. Let's see a major capsid protein over here. So this is a different one. Oh, these are that's the 64 KB that I noticed earlier. Oh yes, this is perfect. Okay, so here's another one. This is the 64 KB contig predicted by VirSorter to be category 1, major capsid protein, lots of hypotheticals, all the same strand, a prohead core capsid protease, GP20. That's like, it's portal. Oh my gosh, yeah, this is like the perfect example. I'm so glad that I clicked on terminase. Yeah, this is screaming absolutely, oh my God, category 1 right here. So this is very, very much a virus. Yeah, this is a game-winning shot. So we can have confidence. You can actually scroll through and look through each of these contigs if you'd like to. We don't have time for that. This is kind of like really exciting stuff, especially after you classify them, which we're going to get to. I don't want to spend too long on this. And then you can actually browse through and do lots of additional analysis using the other KBase apps. And so, yeah, let's kind of move on. Okay, so the tool we're going to be using to classify them is vContact 2. This was released late of last year, so maybe a year ago at this point. And so what vContact 2 consumes is an annotated genome object. So what Proker generates is a genome, as you can kind of see here, category 1, 2, 4, 5, following in from the assembly. And on this genome object are all of those annotations that we see. And vContact will read in those annotations and construct this table that you see here. And basically the fundamental way vContact works is through a gene sharing network. And basically the more genes you share between any two genomes, the more likely it is that you're related. So if you share 9 of your 10 total genes with another virus or another virus, then it's highly likely that those 2 viruses are related at some level. Now, if you're sharing 9 of your 10 genes for both of them, could be the same species, maybe not, or you're definitely in the same genus. If you share 7 of those, maybe you're in the same genus, or maybe you're in the same subfamily. And I won't give you don't use those as kind of clear and fast measures because every virus group is different. And you'll find some that like, don't have a lot of genes being shared, but they're still highly related. And then you'll have some that are seemingly identical, but are definitely not in the same like species. And so basically what vContact does is it constructs this protein cluster table and uses that to construct this network. And of course, this is a very overly simplified network, but imagine you've got 2, 3, 4, 5,000 of these rows and columns. In fact, these rows can be huge. Like you end up with a matrix that's like 5 or 10,000 by potentially hundreds of thousands to millions of columns. And that's pretty computationally expensive, but one of the great things that vContact 2 does was kind of reduce those thresholds. So it's faster than vContact 1. It is quite a bit more accurate, and it has lower kind of computational requirements. So you can use this for very, very large data sets. And I'm not going to go into the kind of the science or the math behind this. I don't want to bore you with this. There's papers that you can refer to with actual, algorithms and equations that you can follow along with if you're really interested in that thing. But suffice to say, the more kind of genes you share between, genomes A, B, and C here, these look like they're sharing quite a few of them. You're probably going to be in the same group, at least the same genus. And then, of course, genomes D, E, and F on this other side. Like this bottom 3 rows are D, E, and F, if you can't see that on your screen. Highly related. Now, C and D share just a couple genes. So this is C, and this is D. Right here, they share 2 genes. But versus the others that share 2, 4, 6, 8 genes. And only sharing 2 genes is going to get you connected, but it's not going to get you, family or genus membership. So we basically apply this to your entire data set. Okay, let's see. Okay, so let's move on. You configure. Hopefully I'm not taking too much time. I tend to get really excited and go off track. So usually, if we weren't having a webinar, people would be like looking at me and I'd be able to tell. And so the input viral genomes is going to be the one from Proca right here. There are a lot of advanced parameters that I'll kind of go through. There's a bunch of reference databases here. I would only use the most recent database, which for right now is RefSeq version 201. We have prokaryotic and archaeovirus only data sets, basically because I came from an archaeovirus lab, and sometimes people are only looking for archaeoviruses. And so, why search through all the bacterial ones when you can do the archaeal ones in much shorter amount of time. I typically choose the prokaryotic version, always go with the latest. The only reason these other ones are here is because I think 85 was used in the manuscript, so people can compare the results to the manuscript version. Or if you've already run a number of data sets using, let's say, version 88, and you want to continue that without being kind of forced into using the most recent version and then maybe going back to the beginning and reclassifying all those initial data sets you already processed. I would not change the protein clustering method or the viral cluster method, which I'm going to go into. It's not really necessary. The optimized distance here is kind of important when you're dealing with very large scale data sets. So what vContact 1 and 2 did is they create this network, they cluster those this network, which is why you see these kind of highlighted regions. And then what it does is it goes through a second pass of each one of those clusters and refines those clusters to the ICTV, or the International Committee of the Taxonomy of Viruses, and ensures that each one of those clusters is basically adherent to basically the genus level taxonomic, the genus level. And by doing that, like the resulting viral clusters are geared specifically for the genus level. Now, we could have chosen the family, the subfamily, the order, but that's not what people are always interested in. They want to dive as deep as possible. And what optimized distance does, and so we actually went through a lot of work to basically hand curate the optimal distance in order to get the standard scaled, I guess, data sets a few years ago in order to get them to the genus level. What optimized distance does is it throws out that empirically determined value and recalculates it based on the entire breadth of sequences that you have. So that includes all of the references, so 2,000 or 3,000 references plus, in this data set, it could be like 5,000 or more, 10,000 viral genomes, because when you're constructing networks, the scale of your networks can affect how the algorithms perform. And we realized that when we set it to handle really large data sets, like 50,000 genomes and more, some of the genomes were kind of drifting away from where we wanted them to be. And so we basically created this optimized distance to refine them to take into account the scale of the data. And I'm going to run out of time, but so these are a lot of options here. I apologize that I can't go through all of these. There was quite a few here. I was on a run adding a bunch of these. Most of them you won't have to change. I would, for example, if you're running with vContact and you don't get results that you kind of expect, or you have two genomes that should be in the same genus, but they're totally not connected, then you could email myself or the other authors, and we could probably help guide you to what kind of subtle parameters you might need to change. Chances are you won't need to adjust any of these. And in the hundreds and hundreds of emails I've ever addressed over vContact, only a handful of them, so we're talking a few percent, have ever adjusted any one of these options. The only reason I include those here is to give the users kind of the control over those options. There was one option I wanted to make sure that I got to, max significance. It's kind of buried here. So if you have a data set with a lot of highly related viruses, but you know that they're kind of different, they're probably not in the same species, that can kind of be confusing for the clustering algorithm. And that's because the viruses are so highly related that they look identical to each other, according to the statistics kind of that are being used. And what max significance lets you do is increase the threshold at which you need to be similar to each other. So you might have a lot of genomes that have 8 out of their 10 genes alike. Maybe all of them have 8 out of 10 genes similar. Now, the algorithm can't distinguish which ones should be in which clusters. But if you increase the maximum significance, it's like increasing the threshold. So now you're not looking at 8 out of 10, you're looking at 80 out of 100 genes, let's say, relatively speaking. And now you're 77, you share 77 genes versus sharing 83, is now you have enough of a difference in order for the algorithm to correctly place those genomes into the appropriate viral clusters. So that's probably the only one I would change, just grossly going over this crazy quickly. So for vContact 2, you get one results file. We are constantly improving this app, like literally, like I've added a lot of updates to this app recently because I want to make sure that the results kind of like perfect, but you're still constrained by like kind of the web interface and kind of the restrictions there without doing a lot of web development. You get this really large table with lots of thousands of lines where you get all the references and their classification, which VC, which is the viral cluster that they're proud of, along with the status. And I've got detailed explanation on what each of the statuses mean in a box below here. And the size of that viral cluster, as well as what's called a VC subcluster. And I might be getting ahead of myself, but basically there's the initial clustering that's called the VC. And then there's the subcluster, which is that kind of second pass that I was talking about. And for the vast majority of the time, these are going to be absolutely identical between them. So for example, the size of the original VC, let's say was 2, 20, 2, 2. These are for each of these, the VCs that those references are in. And then the subcluster size is exactly identical. So basically the initial pass, the initial clustering was able to get the correct clustering at the genus level. And that the second refinement really didn't do anything to improve the results. And then you've got a bunch of these confidence scores, p-values and significances, as well as the quality of the viral cluster. These can be a little hit or miss because this depends on kind of how they were positioned in the network. I won't go through that in too much detail here, but suffice it to say, all of this is explained in the results kind of below. So I go into detail about how to process and look over these results in this table, and I will do that. And so in case the next minute or two I'm going over this, it's too quick, you can follow along here. So, you can kind of get your results. So you don't really miss anything, I should say. So what I'm going to do is view this in a separate window. Sorry, it's going a little bit past. I wanted to time this for an hour. And so this is kind of an unwieldy table. And if you don't like to deal with HTML-based tables, let me look at the thing right here, the chat, make sure that no one, let's see. So you can choose to copy this table to, another place. You can download it as an Excel table. For those people who like Excel, that might be the first thing that you do. You can totally do what I'm doing in terms of add some equations and filters onto your your Excel tables. You can download it as a CSV. I personally do not use this kind of web interface in order to process the results. I would download this as a CSV and run a script basically to kind of do everything that I'm doing by hand, but by a script. So the first thing I like to do is first filter by kind of the genome. And an interesting trick is that Metaspades generates all of its contigs using the node that has node in the label. All the references have these little tildes in them. And the tilde is because of some code in the background that I won't get into, but basically all the references have tilde, so you could filter by that. You can click onto and type in node, and it immediately filters your table. So there was 4,300 total entries. That's total genomes in this data set. If you click on or type in node, you get 895, and that's great because that's the number of genomes that were in the bin contigs object. I guess I didn't go over that. And there were the number of contigs that were annotated by Proker. None of these have assignments. And that is probably the #1 biggest complaint people have had about vContact, is that these aren't like assigned. And that was kind of a decision made kind of very late in the process about whether or not to kind of give the same give the same kind of credence to the assignment that all the references themselves have. So if you see order family genus and they've got an assignment, that means that they were considered by ICTV or with a little help from NCBI, considered part of that classification. And we didn't want individuals to get confused by kind of claiming that those sequences are part of them. And it's always kind of left to the researcher to make those claims themselves. So basically take the genomes that are associated with the references, as you'll see in a moment here, and do another stage of analysis. Maybe there's some marker genes in that clade or that group that the references also have, in which case they can go and make that claim that, yes, this is part of the same genus. We just didn't want people to blindly be taking 50,000 genomes and, you know, every paper that comes out, it's like, oh, we've got thousands and thousands of new genera that we found, hundreds of new families, and everyone's making those same claims. And we really need people to like make sure that they're going through and verifying the data and ensuring that when they're publishing this, that, you know, if everyone has 1,000 new families, that we're all talking about the same new families. The next thing is what I like to do is adjust by status. And there's clustered, which I'll go into. These are the high confidence, you know, you can trust these after all that spiel, trust these that they're at that genus level. There's overlaps. So these are ones where the vContact couldn't decide which VC to put them in. And so it gave you information about which 2 VCs they probably could be in. And then I would look at those members of those VCs and identify, you know, maybe you can't make a decision, or maybe there's a single gene that defines whether or not you should be in one or the other. And then clustered singleton is kind of a weird one because that's when they were in a cluster initially, but then upon a second pass, they were not found to be in the genus level. In fact, the other members of that cluster could be part of a separate genus. And so we basically split that up to say that, hey, you were clustered, but at what ICTV defines as part of that genus, you didn't make the cut. And so we're taking you out, and there were no other members for you to identify with, associate, so it's not a subcluster. So sadly, you were a singleton. So that's what it clustered. So you initially clustered, and then you became a singleton because, you know, you had no other genera members. You're still part of the same family, but just not part of the same genus. So I would go through. So we've filtered on node, we filtered on clustered, and then what I like to do is sort by VC. And then what I do is painstakingly, because, you know, you're going to be publishing this data, so make sure that, you know, you've got confidence in it. I would go through and start comparing the size of each of this VC. So there's 2, 4, 6, 8 VCs that are VC 124, and I'd look at the size of that VC. So there's 8 here. And you could do that, you know, 221, there's 4. And so I count 1, 2, 3, 221s, 4. Here's an example. Oh, actually 221 is a perfect example here. So 221 initially had those four for that VC, but 221 also had two other members that were clustered, and they couldn't put that back into the other members of that VC. So what I can tell you here from 221 is that there are at least three genera in here. One that belongs to the 221.0 subcluster, and then two separate genera that potentially are separate genera that were classified as singletons, because 221.1 and 221.2 are unlikely to be part of the same genus. Now, if they were, they would both be 221_1. And so basically that's what so this is the initial VC, and that's kind of the subcluster. I should have mentioned that beforehand. And let's go through here. Let's see. Okay, so there's quite a few, and you could go through this all you want. There's other ways of filtering this. As I've said before, anyone who enjoys using Excel, have at it. You could do the same process. If you download this as a CSV, you can process it with just a little bit of Python or Perl or whatever your favorite programming language is. I wanted to find the first one. I think it was on, okay, here we go. Page 8. So basically I'm going through 290 has two of them, 291 has 4, 331 has 23. Oh, wait, I have only two nodes here that have 331 and a size of 23. Where did the other 21 go? And the other 21 are references because we filtered by node, and the only thing left are those references. But I don't want to bore you with 21 other items in this list. And so we'll look at 332. So there's one. Oh, there's only one 332s. But the size here said 3. Where did those other 3 go? Well, the same place the other 21 went for the cluster above. So what I'm going to do is take off node, and put in 332. Perfect. So we have a three member cluster, viral cluster. These are highly likely part of the same genus. This node is 14 KB, which are much smaller than those two, than the cyanophage and Synechococcus phage. This is a great example, and it's the example I chose to use because these two virus references are highly prevalent and widespread across the ocean. They have, thankfully, several papers that you can look for. I probably should have put them in here, but you can actually Google Scholar them if you'd like, PSS2 and SCBS2. They are often found to be in the same cluster or the same groupings. They align and follow genetic trees closely, very like they're almost always adjacent to each other, unless there's kind of other novel members in them. These are almost certainly part of the same genus. And there is actually a paper that was published not too long ago that identifies these two as highly prevalent in the actual station that I chose. And I was super thankful that that happened because I didn't know going in before this. Like I knew there were viruses in the sample, but I didn't know what kind. I expected because from literature search, I know that cyanophage and Synechococcus are, globally abundant and widespread, but particularly at the station, I think it's station 36, that I chose. You can do this with lots of other data sets. Unfortunately, I wish that would have kept my spot. You can go through, yes, there's 50 of them. I am trying to figure out ways of making this a little bit faster and easier. I would very much like for it to be like kind of already break it down for you. but it's all, funding and developer time and just, all the effort to kind of make it as easy for the user as possible in order to kind of process this data set. Let's see. Okay, that's the summary. I do go through how to do this, highlighting each one of the items right here. There's at least 7 other VCs that we'd find here, all these different VCs. And then if we take a quick peek at one of those other VCs, we get a Pelagibacter phage, which if you Google that, you're going to get 1 million hits. Super highly abundant, highly relevant to the Earth's oceans. And we apparently have a cluster that has 37 KB, 5 KBs. These are probably fragments, 12 KB, 37 is probably still. And you can explore and do other things that you would like with those genomes. I go through here a little bit in more detail what what a VC really means, because we always use VC to term viral cluster. Technically, it's a subcluster. Authors could never figure out how to define them like explicitly, and most people just use the term VC generically now because most of the time VC and VC subcluster are identical. Technically, it's a subcluster, but if you use VC, I'm not gonna, as long as you know and everyone knows what you're talking about, we, have no problem with that. The VC status, I go into a little bit of detail here, why we've kind of classified it like that, or use those terms. So that will help you analyze that. Okay, so in conclusion, basically what we've done is processed a viral data set, an actual legitimate real viral data set from SRA. You can go to SRA, look at the bio project, click on any of the other data sets there. You could choose the microbial ones, the other viral data sets, and process them identically here. We have identified those contigs as putative viruses, and we even classified them into genus level clusters. So with those at least 8 VCs, we have confidence that we can apply the genus of those to the clusters, the other nodes, I keep on saying nodes, the other genomes that were in those clusters. There are larger clusters there that did not have references. And those are the most exciting ones because those are basically novel genera. Those could be part of novel families that science hasn't seen yet. And some of those were actually quite huge. I should have written down, but the example that you saw there was, I think there was a 31 or 32. There are 40s in there. So there's like, I think there was a VC with like 44 new members. And so that's a new genus just waiting to be discovered. You can use those with other apps that are in KBase. So you can align those genomes so you can extract out those viral genomes. You can identify shared genes or shared features. You could extract those features and like I kind of write here, what you can use for other KBase apps. Unfortunately, I've already taken a little bit, around an hour, actually that's kind of what I budgeted, and do various other analyses. But basically what you have are putative or strongly suspected putative viral genomes. And you know which ones those are, so you can take those specifically from the bin contigs object or the assembly objects. And you have annotated genus level groupings of those. And so for those of you who are microbial, now that you have a cluster or a grouping or an annotation associated with them, you can use the kind of KBase family of apps to do other processes. Now that you have a group, you probably have shared genes or shared features. So you can take those and maybe do a phylogenetic analysis. Or, oh yeah, I wrote it down here, glad. you can actually use KBase's JGI search feature and search your genes or genomes against JGI. You can actually use all of the reference databases, all the data sets that KBase has to offer, and import them into your narrative or search against them. And you can actually make a global story out of any one of the genomes or genes that you're interested in. So if a particular genome that you have has, major coprotein, capsid protein, but also has like a suspected AMG. In fact, there's a tool coming online on KBase. I'm still debating whether or not I should make the name. It basically identifies AMG in microbial data. And you can actually use it to identify AMGs potentially in your viral data too. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead. Hopefully the authors don't yell at me. It's not released yet. It's still a beta. Yes, it is. Okay. Yeah, so you can actually use this tool called DRAM. And I hope the authors don't come by and kill me because it's still a beta app. Beta app, there's some expectation that it works, but it might not. It's still at the testing phase. And so you could apply DRAM to your contigs and you can get, it will identify microbial genes, AMGs in your data set. And you can compare those with the results here. And then you'd have viruses that have AMGs. And so you can have, crazy stories about that. And so if you want to read about the science kind of behind these tools, we have the original VirSorter. There's VirSorter 2. I should have put it here. But you can Google search VirSorter 2. It's an improvement. We didn't have time to add it to KBase because it was only released like a few weeks, a month ago. Might still be on bioarchives. But it's out there. We'd love to integrate it. And then here are the first two VirSorter apps and tools. I did want to cover just known issues. I apologize. I didn't want this to go super long. VirSorter could generate a bad KBase object. Ignore that. It's probably a developer issue. That bad KBase object is the bin contigs object that when you click on it, it always works. So it's like, hey, there's a bad object here. You click on it and it's fine. And let me just look at the chat. Okay. VirSorter doesn't like to use that diamond. There's a bug with diamond that I only recently identified. Not bug technically with diamond, it's just how diamond runs on the system that I need to go back and fix. And then you'll be able to use diamond just to kind of speed up VirSorter's results. It does curiously work with the trusted genomes. And I think that's how it was kind of how it's running in the background is the reason why. And vContact 2 only works on a single annotated genome or assembly object. The developer, i.e. me, probably needs to go through and update that. But because of how we've processed the viral metagenome, that shouldn't be a problem. I would like to be able to add multiple annotated genome or assembly objects to this, but you can always use the KBase apps to kind of merge them together and then process them. Basically, it's that vContact 2 only takes a single input file, whereas some might think that, oh, you can just click on the plus that a lot of KBase apps have and add a bunch of them. Now, instead of that, you just have to merge them before. And then finally, thank you so much for doing this, for KBase allowing me to do this. And thank you so much for, sitting here, hearing me blab for the last hour and 10 minutes or so, hour and 15. Thank you so much. If you have any feedback, certainly shoot KBase or me an email. If you have any problems here, you can go to the help board here. I'm sure the chat is blowing up. I will stop my screen share right now so that it gives other people, maybe KBase, an opportunity to come by. And now let me click on the chat. And at the top of that chat was the document So I'd never actually had this. And I'm going to go through the options right now, unless KBase wants to interrupt me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say thanks for that, Ben. That was a great job, and yeah, I can definitely tell there's a lot of people interested in this. Yeah, like Ben said, if you have any questions, you can go to our help board, or just reach out to us on Twitter or wherever you're at, and feel free to ask us questions. Uh, this this webinar will go up as soon as it finishes rendering on my computer after we stop. But the questions and answers document will also stay open too. It looks like a lot of the questions got answered. I don't see
Okay,
any
awesome.
unanswered.
These are great
here.
questions too.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that there are people there to support the question responses.
Totally.
Awesome.
Totally.
Okay, that's great.
And I guess with that, we'll just stop it here for today, and just everyone should give a round of applause to Ben for this excellent presentation, and we'll see you on the system.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this webinar. For more webinars and tutorials, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can see announcements for upcoming webinars and recordings for previous webinars on our website at kbase.us/learn. Let us know in the comments what content you'd like to see in future webinars. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at DOE KBase. And if you have questions or encounter an error when using KBase, please contact the help desk.